What if I told you the very first doctors didn't just give you medicine, they also performed rituals to fight off evil spirits? Sounds pretty wild, right? Well, today we're jumping in a time machine and heading 4,000 years into the past to meet them in ancient Mesopotamia.
Seriously, just take a second and try to picture it. No emergency rooms, no pharmacies, no high-tech scans. If you got sick or broke a bone, your options were, well, let's just say they were very, very different from what we have now.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How did people get better back then? We're about to find out, because we're diving deep into ancient Mesopotamia, and you're going to be shocked by just how advanced the world's first doctors really were.
Okay, so our story starts in Mesopotamia. You've probably heard it called the cradle of civilization, that land right between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Well, it turns out it was also the cradle of organized medicine. Now this right here is the key idea to understanding their entire approach. For them, being healthy was all about balance, a balance between the physical body and the spiritual world. So if you got sick, it wasn't just a physical thing. It was a sign that something was out of whack with the gods or some other unseen force.
And how in the world do we know all this? The answer is an incredible invention called cuneiform. It was one of the very first systems of writing, where they'd press these little wedge-shaped marks into wet clay tablets. This allowed them to create the world's first medical textbooks, preserving all their knowledge for us to discover thousands of years later.
So let's say you're living in ancient Babylon, and you wake up feeling awful. You've got two different types of experts you could go see. Let's meet them.
On one side, you have the Ashupu. Think of this person as a spiritual expert. Their job was to figure out if you'd somehow angered a god or if maybe an evil spirit was causing your trouble. On the other side, you have the Asu. This person was much more like a modern doctor, using physical things like herbs, bandages, and ointments to treat you.
But here's the most important part. This was not an either-or choice. To get completely better, you had to see both. You needed the Ashupu's prayers and rituals to fix the spiritual problem, and you needed the Asu's medicine to fix the physical symptoms. It was a complete, holistic approach to getting well.
So how did these healers know what they were doing? Were they just guessing? Absolutely not. They were incredibly organized. They had a whole system for diagnosing and treating sickness, and it was all written down on clay. What's really amazing is how logical their process was. I mean, look at it. Examine the patient, note the symptoms, consult your records, and then identify the illness. That's pretty much the same basic foundation that doctors still use today. And they were meticulous. A healer would pay close attention to every detail, the color of your skin, if you felt hot to the touch, exactly where the pain was. Then, they'd compare all those symptoms to the massive libraries of medical information they had stored on those clay tablets.
Okay, so once they figured out what was wrong, what did they actually do about it? You might be surprised by how effective some of their treatments actually were.
Their pharmacy was basically filled with powerful stuff from nature. They used willow bark, which actually has the same chemical compound that's in aspirin. They used mint to help with stomach problems, and they put honey on wounds, which we now know is a natural antiseptic that helps stop infections. Pretty smart, right?
And it wasn't just about mixing herbs and potions. Get this, they were capable of performing actual surgery.
Yep, you heard that right. Using sharp knives made out of bronze or obsidian, which is volcanic glass, they could set broken bones with splints, clean out infected wounds with things like oil and wine, and even drain painful abscesses to relieve the pressure.
What's even more mind-blowing is that they understood the link between cleanliness and health. They built huge canals to bring fresh water into their cities, and they even had early forms of toilets and drainage systems to get rid of waste. This was public health, thousands of years ahead of its time.
Now, this wasn't just a collection of traditions. In Mesopotamia, medicine became a real, regulated profession, and there were serious consequences if you failed.
Over in the famous city of Babylon, the great king Hammurabi created a set of laws for everyone to follow, and he had them carved into a giant stone pillar. And a whole section of this famous code was dedicated just to doctors.
The rules were crystal clear, and the stakes were incredibly high. For instance, the code says that if a surgeon saves a nobleman's life, he gets paid a nice fee of 10 silver shekels. But if that same surgery causes the patient's death, the surgeon's hands get cut off. They took medical accountability very, very seriously.
This was a massive step forward for humanity. It was one of the very first times in history that laws were specifically created to protect patients and hold doctors to a high standard of care.
So when you put it all together,
Their legacy is just immense. They gave us that core diagnostic method. They were the first to really document the use of countless natural medicines. They pioneered the whole idea of medical laws and ethics, and they really laid the foundation that future doctors in Greece and Egypt would build on.
So much of what we just take for granted when we go to a doctor's office, the observation, the diagnosis, the professional standards, all of it can be traced right back to these ancient healers and their incredible clay tablets.
It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? As advanced as our medicine feels today, what will the doctors 4,000 years in the future think about what we do? What parts of our modern medicine will they look back on and call ancient?